Welcome to another edition of One More Light with me, Val KLEINHANS, where we chat mental health in a big effort to break the stigma, because I think that starts with conversation. And I love chatting with people who agree and feel the same way about it. One of those people is Zaira Armendáriz. I am so excited to absolutely have her here. She is a podcaster herself. She is a content creator herself. She also just enjoys talking mental health in general. And I don't know if you're currently still a filmmaker, but I know at least at one point that you were. She does all the things. So let's start with this. You have so many titles. How do you avoid burnout?
I could talk a lot about burnout. I have definitely suffered burnout. That is partially why I have not done film since graduating undergrad, was partially due to burnout, to be totally frank. And I've had to really manage burnout, even with doing the podcast, since I've been doing it since 2021. Since 2021, I've been doing the podcast, since I've had to really learn how to manage everything, my personal life, work, school, like all of it. So yeah, we could talk all about burnout because baby,
It's real.
it's real. It is real. People don't realize it, but it is so real.
Well, when that creeps up on you, how do you know that it's time to take a tea, it's time out time? What are your indicators of that?
Yeah, so when it's really, really bad, I will actually get sick, like with a
Mm,
severe cold or flu.
okay.
So it was really interesting. After every semester of college, I would always get sick with a cold or flu. After every finals, sick. It was always guaranteed. And it was just that burnout. You're studying, you're doing this test, nonstop, not eating, not sleeping, all of it.
Right.
Um, so sometimes if it gets to that point, I will get legitimately sick. And now I've noticed, am I getting irritable? Am I sleeping? Am I eating? Because that's a big thing I've realized. If I'm stressed, some people stress eat. I don't eat at all. I have no appetite. And so surprised, like during my senior year, I actually lost like 20 pounds just from not eating because I
Wow.
was so stressed out. And I didn't realize this until months later. I was like, oh my God, like it creeps up on you. Like you don't realize it during it, but that's just something I'm aware of. Like, is my appetite there? Because if it's not, okay, I'm probably a little stressed. I need to reassess. Um, on the physical side, like, am I breaking out?
Mhm.
Like my skin, like, does my stomach hurt? Because I used to have a really severe anxiety, and so my stomach was the first indicator. Is my stomach upset? Do I need to reassess the situation? Like I said earlier, irritable. Am I getting cranky? Am
Yeah.
I getting just like snappy for no reason? And am I feeling kind of on autopilot? Like, am
Mhm.
I actually enjoying my hobbies, or do I just don't even have energy and time for myself, for my family, for friends? It takes a while to really kind of figure out your cues, I think, at least in my case. Sorry if you hear my cat in the background.
I have
If
a
you
cat
happen to
too.
hear my,
I
okay,
do.
perfect.
No,
I hear him. I
they're
see him walking over here.
I know.
Um
For as independent as they say cats are, they're really not. Like they do need the
no.
humans. They do.
Yep. Yep, he's right here behind me. um I think for me, again, personally, it took time to start really figuring out like my patterns and
Mhm.
what was bothering me, what was starting to be my cues. And I think I've finally gotten to a place where I've realized it, and now I've started working on the preventative side. Like, for people listening, like I have my podcast. I started season 2 again this year, and all throughout the summer, I was pre-recording episodes back after back. So I have episodes set till the end of the year. At the time we're recording this, like a few months out, I'm all set. But
Facts.
then I realized I'm starting to get burnt out. Like, I don't want to edit. I
Mm.
don't want to schedule another episode. It's like, okay, I need to slow down and take some time for me. Because another part that I realize, I love being busy. If I have a day where I have no plans, I hate it. But then I need to have a day with no plans because that's healthy. Like, I need time for myself.
Uh, yeah, I'm listening to myself right now, essentially. While I'm hearing those words come out of your mouth, I'm like, oh my God, like, My podcast is done the same way. And I'm like, and it's so strange how easy you can realize when you're burned out, particularly when I think you realize it easier when you're doing something you do actually enjoy. Because otherwise, we would love to edit. We would love to create those graphics to promote the episode or whatever. We're excited about that. We do enjoy doing it. But it's like, baby, if this is a point where you don't even want to do that, that's a huge clue. I feel that at work, like sometimes too, whenever most of the time I'm pretty cheerful. Work doesn't really get me down just because I don't focus on it as hard as I used to, because I learned the hard way on that one. But I can tell, like, if I'm getting snappier, just like you were saying, when over the dumbest things, or over things that otherwise I might ignore or let go. That's another clue too. I think it helps to know what burnout looks like for each of us, because it doesn't look the same for everybody, but there definitely are some general overtones that might help us with a clue. So when you're burnt out, you take time for you. What does that look like? Your version.
Yeah. So, okay, I actually have a very recent example of this. Last weekend, we were supposed to record, but I got sick. I took full advantage of that weekend, not see anybody, no plans. I had me time. Me time partly looked like cleaning because I really needed to clean. So I was like, let me just take care of the chores I need to do, because that's like my self-care for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I deep cleaned my closet, my shelves. I got a whole box stuff of like, I don't need this anymore. I threw it away. And now my space is clean and less cluttered. So like mentally for me, I already feel much better. I, made dinner. I just sat at the couch. I watched an episode of a show that I had been wanting to watch. I chatted with my dad and my brother, and I just did not worry about needing to edit, about work, needing to make plans. I disconnected as much as I could.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, if you're starting to not want to do the things that you love doing, that's where there's the issue. And I actually have a mentor, and she taught me about, finding your unicorn space. And basically,
I love the name.
right? Yeah, like finding okay, so like unicorn space, how she describes it is, all right, well, like for me, it's the podcast. My podcast is it's not my main source of income. It's my passion project. Hopefully it can be down the road, but this is my project. This is my baby. This is what I like to do. This is my way of like my creative outlet.
Yeah.
Don't make it about work. Because then you ruin part of the fun. You ruin part of the creative aspect, the way you want to express yourself. If you make it about work, you're taking away the fun out of it. So don't make it about work, or even, find a different hobby. Like if it's reading, that's my unicorn space. Like I'm not making it a chore. It's just time for me to like enjoy a good book.
Yeah. I love that. I've been reading or trying to read a little bit more myself, or watch TV that's sort of like mind numbing and that I don't have to think too much about, and I could just calm down with. Like I'm working through the ultimatum right now. Hopefully, I'm working through it right now, and then hopefully, I know Love Is Blind is coming back soon on Netflix too, so I'm ready for that.
No, you don't even understand. Love Is Blind. Oh my God, that is my guilty pleasure show. I just need a show. That is my time where like no one talk to me, not even like my phone. It's on silent. Like this is my time to just get out of my head.
Yeah, we need to see if Micah is going to come up in here and ruin everything again. Like she tried to with Kwame. She was just trying. She was doing the most. We had enough of Micah. I did. Erna and Micah, I had enough of both of them. I was like, bye.
Oh my God. Yeah, no. Like Love Is Blind, The Ultimatum. All good. Oh yeah.
They're amazing. Well, I love how to the point your Instagram bio is too. It says, I talk about mental health and drink wine. So I knew you were my girl then. But when you talk about mental health, what is it that you say? What do you like to say?
I loved your intro of the episode where, it starts with having conversations. And that's been my big point with my platform is having the difficult conversations. And the reason why I started the podcast is because I realized through therapy, which I started therapy for the first time during the pandemic. And I realized Well, there was a lot of topics that if someone had talked to me about this when I was younger, it would have saved me a lot of headaches.
Okay.
And what can I do? Like, again, I stopped making film, but I'm still a creative and a content creator. What can I do that's gonna benefit the world in some way? If it can help at least one person, that's all I want. So, I started doing episodes of like, let me start having tough conversations with people because I know there is a space and a need for it. And I again, that's why I was so excited when you reached out with like again another podcast on mental health because these conversations are so important
Yeah.
and a whole spectrum of topics. Like it doesn't matter how many times you need to talk about it, someone else has a different perspective, a different experience,
Right.
and someone else is going to get something out of it. So yeah, for me, that was just that's the root core. Like the conversations need to be had.
They do. And just personally, I'm curious, red wine or white wine? I'm a white wine
Red.
girl.
Oh,
Red.
I'm a red. I'm
Okay.
a red. So I love me a good Cabernet Sauvignon, like it's
Ooh,
Syrah, like the bold reds with spices.
ah, perfection. I don't know. Reds, I like them if they're not too dry.
Okay.
Some of them can be too dry, but I'll
No.
try. I'll try
Yeah.
anything once. I'll put it that way. I'll try it all once.
Okay. Your favorite type of white?
Favorite type of white is definitely a good Pinot Grigio or Riesling.
Pinot Grigio. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh, yeah,
Or
Riesling. I actually just had a Riesling earlier.
did you?
I
Yeah.
did with my salmon. Yep. I just had a Riesling before this.
Wow, I'm coming to your house next time. My God, I want salmon. That's
Oh,
awesome.
girl. No, we'll have you as a guest on my podcast because every episode, I'm always having a glass of wine. So we'll make that work.
We'll do it. We'll do it. One thing that I learned about you while I was reading was, you were actually born in Mexico City and you eventually came to California. So one thing that I wanted to learn from you, just as somebody that's come to this country, was does that journey in itself have an impact on your mental health at all, coming from a totally different country to somewhere else?
Yeah, so I want to clarify first. I came here when I was like 1, so it kind of doesn't count.
Oh, got it. I
But
understand. Okay.
yeah, yes. But my birth mom is from Mexico City. Like she's from Mexico. My dad is third generation here in the States.
Okay.
So I do have insight on the mental health aspect. I think especially what I've experienced with my circumstance and then other Hispanics, there is a little bit of not a little bit, there is a huge stigma when it comes to mental health and getting help.
Mhm.
And so, growing up, my mom dealt with some mental health issues and never wanted to get help. And, being in the same household, you end up getting the direct repercussions of that.
Yeah.
And so, not that I have personal experience coming here as either an immigrant or anything like that, but seeing someone else from like a different culture and not having the awareness to seek the help or her experience adjusting here, like I definitely was a first witness to that. So it can be difficult, and I think especially that's another part with like other Hispanics, if anyone's listening, you know the stigma is real, but we need to do our part to start breaking it. And again, it starts with the conversations.
Yeah. What is the Hispanic view on mental health? Because I really don't have any knowledge.
Again, it's just, I don't want to say ignorance. I don't want to make it sound like, look down on it, but there is a bit of like we call it machismo, like a machismo
Oh,
culture.
got it. Yeah, us Italians too. Us Italians
Yes.
too. Like you got to
Okay.
be the best, and you're better than everybody else, and you got to like put on a good face, and everything's
Yes.
good. It's all good. I'm stronger. I'm better. I got this. Don't worry about me. Worry about yourself. What are you doing? Yeah.
Exactly. Vulnerability. We don't
Yep.
talk about her. She's not here in this
Mhm.
room.
Okay.
Again, you have to have your shit together. You need to be on top of it. If you're sick, no, like rub some dirt on it. You're fine. Suck it up.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's just how it is. And I've noticed, especially with like my uncles, where, if especially they're Gen Xers, where the whole thing of like mental health and quote unquote being soft and all this stuff, like
Mhm.
there's a disconnect in the dialogue. And so it's
Yeah.
now we're starting to see with, millennials and Gen Zers where there's more openness about it. And, like therapy is okay. Like there's a huge thing against therapy, especially for, older generations. I'm sure maybe with Italians, like you guys can relate to that, but it's like, therapy's not a sign of weakness. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with going to therapy. Fuck, like I highly recommend everybody go to therapy, even if you're fine. Like it's like maintenance for your car. Like you would take your car to get checked, even if it's okay. Like, it's oil change. It's probably fine right now, but it's preventative. So why wouldn't you do that for yourself?
Right. Makes total sense to me. I mean, I think my dad is the one that his mom came from Italy. So it was kind of not talked about a whole lot, and it was covered up. We're all good. We're all good. But my dad was kind of the first one that was like, you know what? I'm not having a good time right now. So I'm just gonna go get treatment for that. And watching him and my mom, really, both of them had their own experience with anxiety and depression, including myself. But
Mhm.
like watching them do it and I guess be so open about it, I was really lucky. And it didn't
Yeah.
occur to me that like most families don't have that until I started doing this podcast and talking about it more. I'm like, wow, you guys don't talk about this, or you guys don't like say, hey, I tried this medication, it worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. Like little tips and tricks like that. There are families who legit don't talk about it at all.
Yeah, so my dad's not anti, medication or therapy, thankfully he's been really supportive of my journey, but it's also he was never one to suggest like, oh, you should go to therapy.
Yeah.
It's always been like it's okay, and like I grew up in a Christian household too, so it's always been the, pray about it, like,
Yeah.
all of that. So the dialogue and the conversation is different. And so I've tried my best to bring awareness with my family of like sharing my experience with Journey, because I did it all on my own. I realized there was one day where like I am not okay. I have been doing this on my own for, at that point, it was like 24 years. I'm like,
Wow.
we need to figure something out because this is not working. And so finally figured out, like, I'm just going to try therapy. And I've gotten my friends to go to therapy and they love it. And so now I'm like with my family, if they like need something else, it's like go to therapy.
Yeah. It's super helpful, more helpful than a lot of us realize. I know that you're a creative person too. You mentioned a little bit about the filmmaking, and that's certainly a creative job. I used to do radio, definitely a creative job. I don't anymore. Maybe for the same reason you don't do filmmaking anymore, because I just feel like creative jobs can sometimes be hard to navigate mentally because they're so subjective in nature. Like one person may love what you're doing and another might hate it, and it's easy to feel like you're never making anybody happy, and that's a huge
Mhm.
blow to your confidence. So when you were in that environment, did you struggle with the same thing? How did you protect your own mental health?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a really good question. So well, like with film, this like you go to film school and you realize like, okay, you just need to have tough skin.
Hmm.
Like your projects are gonna get shit on, and that's just part of it. And so thankfully I have a pretty tough skin just because of how I grew up. I realized like just to let things go. But it's always been a very intentional reminder to myself of whether it was a professor, a classmate, an internship I was doing, if the person I was working for, like shat on whatever I provided. It's nothing personal. Everyone is allowed to their opinions and it's fine. Again, we should do it respectfully.
Yeah.
But it is really hard when you're in the creative space and you're constantly being asked for more and more. And
Hmm.
I got to the point, my last film project, I did this crazy big film and it won awards, which was amazing. Did a premiere, was really excited to showcase everybody, and then that day, night of the premiere they're already asking like, okay, when's the next one? And I was
Oh
like, oh my
wow.
God, like I barely, like I worked on this for a year. I don't even get a day where I could just relax and like enjoy being
Yeah.
in the moment. So I
Celebrate
think,
that night at least. Goddamn.
yeah. And I think, yeah, I think that's what like kind of killed it for me, because it's like, fuck, like whatever I'm doing, it's not going to be enough because there's always going to be
Yeah.
what's the next thing, what's the next thing. And I realized like I just can't sustain that way. And I also realized I needed to do a reassessment of where my priorities were and what would make me happy long term. Like, what am I fulfilled at? Is it cranking out these really strenuous projects for awards, or do I need to pivot my direction and switch to something else? And so that's when I realized like I had to have like a whole audit with myself.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make a switch, because as much as I love film, much as I love creating content, I can't do it this way forever.
Yeah.
So through therapy, that's when I started, taking mental health seriously. And then I realized like, well, I've always wanted to do podcasts. Let me do a mental health podcast. And so, I'm combining the both now. It's a healthy space for me, but I get to create as well. So I would always just recommend that to people, just do an audit with yourself. Where are you at? Like, can you do this long term? Is this sustainable? Because if it isn't, that's totally fine. Like, you're not a failure,
Yeah.
but be proactive about it.
Yeah. And have a good like community behind you. In your case, it was your therapist, which is awesome, but like have somebody else in your corner saying, this is not it. Like, and keeping you in check whenever you are just at your wit's end. Cause I learned the hard way on that. For me to leave what I used to do for a living, like it took suicidal ideation and outpatient therapy. We don't have time for that. We don't like her.
Yeah,
So
we know.
before we get there, if someone else is telling you in your life that you trust that you're not doing that well, pay attention, because that can be a huge, huge, huge clue. And 9 times out of 10, you'll probably feel that much better for making that change in your life. I was scared to make that change because that was what I did for a living. I was like, how else am I going to make money? I don't know what else I'm going to do. Blah, blah, blah. And you'd be surprised at how many transferable skills you really have. When you do that self audit that you're talking about, you're like, wait a minute, I did this, which can also turn into this on a resume. Like when you really sit down and think of it, you're not pigeonholed to that forever. And
Yeah.
that was something I had to realize too, because that was a huge reason as to why I didn't leave. I was like, well, what else am I going to do? You don't have to torture yourself that way. So it took time.
It takes vulnerability, and it is scary. Like that was
Yeah.
the same thing for me. I graduated with a film degree, and I graduated 2020. So right when the pandemic happened.
Oh, yeah.
So I graduate and there's no jobs available. And I'm like, fuck, what do I do?
Right. Yeah.
And this is where I kind of put this on myself. Like since age 9, I knew I was going to film school, and that I had put all my eggs in that basket. I didn't give myself room for plan B, plan C, like to explore other options. So when I realized this wasn't going forward the way I expected it would, that hit me really hard, because I punished myself. Like I'm the failure. Like I did this on myself. Like, no, honey, there's a fucking pandemic happening. Like you're fine. Like it's out of your control, literally.
Yeah. We forget that too. We do. I always say I'm my own worst enemy. I will be way harder on myself than anybody else will ever be. Like it's
You're
and
preaching to the choir.
I know it'd be like that sometimes. Well, so tell me about your own podcast. We're kind of leading into that. Complex like wine. How did it come to be? Tell me about it. I know you're excited.
Yes. So kind of like I briefly explained earlier, during the pandemic, started going to therapy for the first time. My first time ever really taking mental health seriously or learning about it. And I've always just liked psychology to begin with. I love connecting with people, and already my friend dynamics, we'd be having a glass of wine and start getting deep conversations that would last hours. That was just like
Those
our
are the best.
typical weekly, let's catch up, have wine, and just like get deep in it. And so I realized like, well, I want to create content, but I need something more fulfilling. Like I want to put something out there that at least can help somebody. So, and like for people that aren't familiar with wine terminology, wine can be complex, and that goes into the layers of wine, the depth, everything. And I used to work at a winery. So like wine is my thing. So I was like, well, complex wine, we're complex like wine. So why not be complex like wine? So that's how the name came about. Again, started in 2021, and it's been such an amazing experience so far. All the people I have met through the podcast, all the amazing conversations, all the things I've learned. It's been amazing. I'm so excited to see where it goes. It's available on all platforms for whoever wants to check it out. I have my own Instagram page for it, or you can like follow me because I post content about there as well. But yeah, it's been really cool. And like now I get to meet you like through the podcast. So like I'm enjoying it.
That's the best part of it for me too, is the conversations you end up having and the people that you end up getting to meet. I was like, oh, I might not have had that conversation if I didn't have this excuse for it. So it's just I say all the time, this is the whole thing is an excuse to BS with people, really. Like I don't even care what it does numerically. I just that's all it is. It's an excuse to BS with people, really.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. For me, my thing's always been like, as long as one person got something from each episode, I did my part. That's all I
Yeah,
need.
facts. That's on period.
Mhm.
What are you excited for next? What are you looking forward to next? Just in general.
In general, yeah. So part through my quarter life quote unquote crisis, like my identity rebirth through the pandemic, I realized I want to pursue my master's in psychology. So I'm looking at starting that next year, which is
Awesome.
really exciting. So, see what happens with that. I'm going to be totally candid and vulnerable because that's what mental health is about. I got laid off today before this recording, and the timing's so interesting because I start classes for like my pre-master stuff next week, and there's like other things going on that was leading up to it, not connected to directly with my company, but like things are just like, whoa, okay, the timing of this is so too spot on
Something
that I'm
else
like,
is at work here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Somebody
like,
else somewhere said it was time to leave that ish behind and start on
yep.
this new.
So
Okay.
I'm just kind of like, all right, I'm buckling in. I don't know where this ride's taking me, but we're going on it. And so I'm just now looking forward to, I have a lot of time to really just focus on the podcast because
Yeah.
I was working full time and the podcast, and now I have school coming up. So I'm like, you know what? This is giving me the time to really be intentional of the things I really want to do moving forward. And so
Yeah.
that's where I'm going. I'm just like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just here.
And
We're just
honestly,
existing.
when you've been through a pandemic, when you've been through mass shootings almost daily, when you've been through like just politicians that never agree on anything, economic crisis, inflation, it's like whatever. Bring it on.
Yeah, I'm like, I've been through worse. It's fine. It's a little bump in the road, but we're gonna figure it out.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait to see it all. And I'm really glad that you made the time for this today, given the circumstances. Damn. Like
Oh no.
I'm so glad that you're here anyway. And we did learn a lot from you. So I thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being here.
Oh no, thank you for having me on. It's been great to finally meet you, and
Yeah,
like I definitely can't wait to connect and collaborate more in the future.
definitely.